As a kid, I never was able to effectively communicate my emotions, not in a really deep way at least. I always felt highly emotional, highly sensitive, like with a very deep reactionary emotional world. Like I was hurt very easily by words, even by minor things from other people. Maybe I was misinterpreting a lot of it, or maybe I wasn't, but very small movements would devastate me. And I wouldn't hide it, I would show it. I would cry a lot as a little kid, constantly crying, it seems like, over little things. Sometimes in situations where it was confusing, and my mom would ask me, like, she would try to help me to, she created the space for me to let it out or to talk about it. I mean, she was asking me to talk about it or trying to get me to talk about it, giving me the opportunity. I was not ignored or mistreated. And even later in life, way later in life, like when I was a teenager, therapy was offered to me. I was even put, uh, like in a couple sessions, like within different contexts, in like a therapeutic setting. And I hated it. I said I hated it. I didn't want to go back, and I never did. So like the help has been offered to me. I've had supportive family my whole life, and it's not as though those around me didn't do what they were supposed to. But I've never been capable of sharing that deep emotional world with other people in a profound way. I'm not saying that I'm absolutely incapable of it. And one thing, it's like now as an adult, I can talk about emotions, and I try to talk about emotions. But that's all it is. All it ends up being, I think, or a lot of what it feels like is me talking about the emotions, not feeling them, showing them, and sharing them. I am feeling them, but I mean, in order to talk about them, I almost have to separate myself a little bit. Then I can analyze them, and then I can break them down using language and trying to help somebody to understand. But there's something that's not very effective there. I'm not good at that. And I've never wanted to do that. Like ever since I was a little kid, even now, I never wanted to do that. But recently, in a conversation, I was speaking with an individual about this past time, this period of my life, in like my mid teens. It really mid to late teens, but it started in my mid teens. And now trauma is an internal experience. I'm not trying to, and I don't believe that I was like victimized or that something did happen to me, but the trauma response was internal. And anyway, in speaking about this traumatic time period of my life, which I had spoken to other people about, I'd spoken to this individual about in another way. I've gone over it in my head, but in speaking to this individual, I was surprised when my eyes welled up with tears, and I almost started to cry. Like I almost broke down crying. And inevitably, they changed the topic. They quickly changed the topic of conversation, or changed the focus, and I was able to like gain control of that. But the simple fact that it happened really opened my eyes, specifically about that time period and about the cause and effect of what really happened back then, and how at the time I probably should have been way more emotional at the time. I probably should have been crying. I should have expressed the sadness that I felt to the person who, I don't want to say the person who caused it, because like I said, it's an internal experience, but somebody did something that hurt me greatly, and I never articulated it to them to this day, and maybe I have to, but it's weird now because it's so much time has passed. And I have worked at forgiveness and growth, and I've had some progress, quite a bit of progress in those areas. But this other day when I became emotional and felt like the depth of that emotion that was still there, that had been pushed down apparently or just ignored, I realized that um, even though I've done this work and worked through some of the process of healing, I haven't completely healed from it. And in that time period when I should have been feeling sad and should have been expressing it, and maybe I should have gone into therapy and done the whole thing, and family therapy, or whatever would have been necessary, my automatic, during the time, my automatic way of coping with it was I didn't even allow myself, and this wasn't a conscious choice, but I didn't allow myself to feel the depth of that sadness and the pain and the hurt and express it with that person, and talk about it. I wasn't capable of doing that. I automatically found the next chain link, like the next. I identified what I felt was who I felt was the cause of it all. But I know that's not the case. And even shortly after that time, I think I knew that wasn't the case. But I found somebody that I could hate, and I hated them. And I fantasized about violence against them, and I fantasized about killing them, to the point that I would even think about realistically what would be my survival strategy when I go to prison after I get caught for killing them. Or even if it was an attempt, even if I didn't succeed, like, I'm going to prison. I'm not built for prison. I don't want to go to prison, but this is what's going to happen. So then what would be, and I was fantasizing about how I would attempt suicide in prison to make it seem like it was legit. I didn't want to kill myself, but just to make it seem like it was legit. So I would get separated from general population, put into ADSEG, and I'd be able to, survive. And it was so not only the trauma and the sadness, the hurt from that event that I wasn't allowing myself to feel, there was this extra layer, or multiple layers, of now having been, and I was not a perfect angel, but from having been a relatively innocent individual, like within my own mind, childhood, early teens, and then all of this stuff happening, I went from occupying pretty benign spaces mentally and emotionally to living my daily existence that was filled with hatred, fantasies of violence, and then I would listen to music that maybe some people would fuel it, but I listened to violent and dark music during that time, and I feel like that was, like, whether it's healthy or not, that was a form of expression, like a release valve to let off some pressure from me. And I think through that I was able to avoid acting on any of it. And I really don't think I ever would have acted on any of it. I didn't act on any of it. It was all just sick and twisted fantasies. But what I was saying was, going from this very benign space to this dark space in a short period of time, that alone I think was traumatic for myself, because, like, I've never wanted to hurt anybody. That was my first time experiencing true hatred, but it was all misguided. The individual who I selected as the target for my hatred and for all of those fantasies wasn't even responsible for the hurt. I was just incapable of processing what had really happened. I was incapable of hating the individual who caused the hurt. I was incapable of feeling the hurt completely and processing it and exploring it with them and whatever, resolving it to begin with. Like, I couldn't handle it. I was already as sensitive as I was, and this was like such a horrible space for me to be in emotionally. I chose not to feel it. I chose not to experience it. I chose not to process it, and I went straight towards anger, which I think, number one, it seems common for teenagers, and I've often brushed it off like this. And I've learned more recently in life that this is a way we don't allow ourselves to process trauma or experience trauma. You'll say, "Oh, like, well, a lot of teenagers are angry," and I don't know, or, well, yeah, we, in many different ways, we come up with almost excuses or ways to say, well, yeah, you know, I imagine somebody who was, like, beat as a kid. Well, yeah, a lot of people are beat as a kid, and I probably deserved it half the time. And there's, like, all these things we say and do to try to, like, minimize it. But that doesn't help with processing it and healing from it and understanding it and resolving it. And that was at least my issue. I never gave myself credit to feel that. I never gave myself permission, I guess, to feel those feelings toward the original person who caused the wound, if you will, and it led to the whole trauma response within myself. I never actually, I couldn't do it, I guess, but I never did it. And I've done it in pieces, I guess, but yeah, the other day after that conversation, I allowed myself to like, I was writing in a journal about it and exploring it, continuing to explore it and feel a lot of stuff that's been in me for a long time. And it helped a lot. I feel like it helped a lot. I don't think it's completed, but I feel like it helped a lot. And yeah, there's so many different sides to it because, and this is something I can only imagine because I never have been in therapy for years, but I can imagine an individual who is like late in their life still talking about how their mother or their father or their brother or their sister, they're still talking about and re-exploring and revisiting these traumas. And I do believe that like this wound that I speak of in my past or in your past, we can always go back and dig it up and feel it. It's always there. It's part of us. It's part of our story. It's part of the person you are today. It's always going to be there to open it up again and feel that sadness. And at a certain point, it becomes unproductive to keep revisiting it and almost like programming your whole experience to be that of a victim, and you are the result of these past traumas, and you have been programmed by them and you can't change. And it's like you can fall into this trap that way. And then on the flip side, there's another trap or just another not so healthy way of dealing with it, which is just to brush it off, which many people do. Like we all, I can't complain. I'm blessed. I've got this. I've got that. And I do feel like that's very important, obviously, to acknowledge what we're grateful for and be grateful for life and all the basic things and all the good stuff. But to brush it all off and say, well, yeah, it's like, I can't complain because I know this person, they had a real traumatic, upbringing, way worse than me, so I can't complain. And they use that perspective, and that's just one example, but they use a perspective or a way of looking at it as a device to not have to deal with it. Now they don't have to process it. Now they don't have to open it up and feel it because it's like, whatever. But when you push it off to the side like that, it still is there in the shadows or in the depth of your heart, affecting everything about the person you are today, affecting romantic relationships, friendships, family relationships, the way you operate in the world, all of it. It's a fine line. There's a fine line there. It's a balance, like, of not constantly revisiting it and rolling around in it to the point where it's like, okay, this isn't productive. I'm just almost re-traumatizing myself by revisiting this shit constantly, right? Because that's a possibility. There's people who do that. They can't let it go, whatever it was. No matter how big or small, they can't let the thing go. And they'll like, it's crazy to think that you have somebody who's like, they'll die of old age, in their 80s or something, with hate in their heart towards their mother or their father or their brother or their sister. And again, it's all relative. Maybe there are situations in which I would think, hey, it's justified. I would hate them too. But in my case, it is realistically manageable, and nobody truly was at fault. And now, like as an adult, I can understand the cause and effect and the chain reaction, and that it was never personal. But because trauma is an internal experience, and I took it personally, and it hurt really bad, and I didn't express that enough. I didn't articulate that like I should have. I was in a weird fucking space, separated emotionally from people who I shouldn't have been separated from, and separated from myself emotionally. And I changed a lot for the worse during that time. And then shortly, almost immediately after that time, I had my first experiences with psychedelics and with cannabis, and I started healing and I started healing a lot. But no matter how much I healed or how many beautiful experiences I had and how I grew closer to God or whatever it would be, I I still was in a way just I had it's as if I had just brushed off that past trauma. Like I had just brushed it away and I'm moving forward now, which is it could be a good thing, just move forward, it was good. But I never when it was fresh, it was still very fresh. I didn't fully understand what was going on with all that. And I had moved as well. I had moved away from the situation, which in a temporary sense, in an illusory temporary sense, I felt like I was like way better now. I'm way better in this new spot. I don't got to deal with it. But the trauma is still there. Like the wound is still there. And I never, yeah. I didn't even realize that I had just brushed it off, that I didn't process it. But all these years later, I feel like I'm making progress, which is good. And it's interesting how that happened the other day, just spontaneously in a conversation. Again, speaking about a topic that I had spoken about in the past and not become emotional, but there was a question that guided me toward an answer, and that kind of made some things clear to me. And I have this book now. First, before the book, Gabor Mate, this author, this individual, I've seen videos of him, and he speaks about trauma, or just emotions. I guess the way he speaks about emotions and trauma and everything about children, it's in a way that I really understand more than anyone. I mean, there's people in the media that are big and on the internet or whatever. Like the person that comes to mind is like Jordan Peterson. And there's some good stuff. Like I've even posted stuff of his on here, like a little short clip. There's some stuff that he has articulated in a way where it clicks. But all in all, his communication style, or maybe it's the way that his perspective, I don't know, but I've never been a fan of his perspective, of his communication style. It doesn't really sit right with me. Yeah, I don't like it. I'll just say I don't like it. And then this individual, Gabor Mate, it's the exact opposite. Like, I don't even remember how I found him, but it just, all of a sudden, there's somebody speaking about all this stuff in a way where it's like, yes, 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 yes. Like, I understand exactly what he's talking about. I completely agree. It makes sense more than anything. Like, it connects. And anyway, I've got a book. I just recently got a book by him that I just started reading, so I haven't even gotten into it. But yeah, it's about trauma on multiple levels and how stress and trauma affects the human organism and humanity as a whole. And he has yet to get into the individual stuff. And I think the main thing about this book isn't necessarily, though it is at the same time, it's about the individual traumas that we experience in our lives, but also because society itself is sick right now and has been for a long time and doesn't seem to be getting any better. There's that layer as well of trauma. You could say I had no trauma in my life. My life was perfect, but living in this world, we all have trauma. This is the idea of the book, explained in a really shitty way, but yeah. This, like I said, maybe if I had gone to therapy a long time ago, I would have started this work a long time ago, but that's not really a productive way to think. I feel grateful that I'm doing it now and that I'm capable of doing it, because it's sad to know that I know people who I love, and there's people who I don't know out there who are just so stubborn that they are not working on it and they never will work on it, and they're not interested in working on it. Maybe they don't know how or whatever, but people who, like I said, will die of old age with crazy levels of unresolved trauma, which had really affected them all along the way. Like our whole life path is affected by this stuff if we take it with us. And maybe even if we do, like, even after you process it and heal from it and forgive and do the work, you still may be forever changed by those events. But it's worse when you turn your back or when you brush it off and you're just like unconsciously driven by all these side effects from that shit. And also not great when you revisit it and revisit it and revisit it, but never do the healing, it's always a blame game kind of thing, you know? Because then you just program very deeply that you are a victim of your past and all this type of stuff. But yeah, it's very important work. It's a good thing, I believe, that I practice mindfulness, and that in general in life I'm always living in the moment and trying to live in the moment when I'm not. Like I'm always recentering myself in the moment, being here, being present, and enjoying all of the simple things in life. And I live a very simple life. And I do practice gratitude. I recognize the things I'm grateful for. Even the simple fact that I wake up, my eyes open in the morning, I'm awake again. I have the opportunity to laugh again and to eat delicious foods and share experiences with people who I love. That all being said, like, one can live like that forever and still just ignore this unresolved stuff. I think I used to believe, maybe as soon as I found it, I used to believe that that there was no use. Like, why go back and revisit this? Like, it's already in the past, and I'm fine. but but yeah, I realized that, like, once again, just to reiterate, I realized in speaking about it the other day that the emotions came up, and yeah, it's not fine. Like, it is necessary to do, like, the difficult work in those very painful areas. And I shouldn't say realize, because it's like I know all this stuff and I've done this stuff, but it was just another layer, another level. It goes deeper than I thought. And I spent like almost a whole week. It started with that, and then it was like I found some music that touched me emotionally, and I cried. It was this Alice in Chains Nutshell MTV Unplugged performance. And also learning about Lane Staley and the context of that performance, and how years later how he died. Like, having that context helped. I went down that little rabbit hole, if you will. But even before that, just the song itself was very heavy. And when an artist or a group of artists can communicate some heavy emotional spaces like that, some like suffering and pain, I appreciate that a lot. Because our society doesn't typically want to look at that. I guess it does, right? Because they were a huge band. But I think about, like, when you're in the grocery store, when you're out in public, it's like some upbeat shit, and it's like happy. You want to feel good. We want to feel good today. The sun's out and all this stuff, and I get that. Like, I love music like that. I listen to a lot of upbeat music that gets me like on one, and I'm feeling good. I don't want to wallow in the mud my whole life, but when an artist can effectively communicate their own pain, and I connect with it like that, and I'll cry from a song, that's not something that happens to me every day. So I did that, and then days later I went back to I started watching again everything that's gone on, everything that's going on, like the aftermath in Gaza, and stuff happening in the occupied West Bank, and all this types of shit. And I allowed myself to suffer there. With an open heart. I don't think I closed it yet, but it's. I laugh. I don't know why I laugh. It's a coping mechanism, maybe, but I am very deeply programmed to do this, where my heart opens, do some work, or just do some feeling. It might not even be work. I'm just allowing myself to feel for the first time in a long time, at a deep level, like to the core. And then I end up going back to baseline, which is it's not that I'm on a daily basis operating like as a cold individual, absolutely disconnected from my heart, but I tend not to give too much weight to emotions. I don't allow them to control me in that way. But yeah, I made a post about this the other day, but the whole thing with like all of these people, like children and women and pregnant women, and innocent men that have been slaughtered in Gaza, especially right now, but even over the years, and in the occupied West Bank and anything happening right there, like as a result of Israel's like show of force that they're doing, and yeah, I feel so helpless when it comes to that, because I'll watch a video and I'll end up crying, and I'll have like I'll be like full body crying at the pain that I'm seeing. Um, just like this absolute hellscape, like emotional hellscape. Not to mention the physicality of it, that everything is leveled, you have nothing left. But just like individuals who are, let's say, 6 years old, and they lost everyone in their family. And it's not as though they went on a trip and came home and, oh no, your house is gone, your family's dead. No, it's that you were there in the building, your ears were ringing, you were like shell shocked, you know what I mean? And you saw it happen. You may have seen your mother or father or brother or sister crushed or blown up into pieces. You may have seen the whole thing. And then it's like, oh, what about, oh, in the neighborhood, oh, that person, like everyone. Like that level of loss is something I never think about, because when I usually, when I think about war, I think about soldiers and war and how ugly that is. But we're not talking about soldiers and war. It's children and women and babies and pregnant women. It's not that there aren't, and that's what's crazy. Yeah, I don't want this video to turn into that, but the whole thing is so fucked up to me, because even people in my family are so cold to this whole thing. It's like, well, Hamas and Human Shields. I mean, they got to do it. They feel like they might as well kill them all. They might as well just wipe them out. They're all going to grow up to be terrorists anyway. This is like what people say. People that I love in my family have said things like this, and it hurts. And I've tried and tried and tried, and there's no, because it's not about like. Yeah, when I say I've tried, it's not an argument or a debate. It's about whether your heart can open or close, you know what I mean? And we're talking about individuals who can't open their heart. They're hardened to the core. And that's so sad. Because it's like, yeah, but anyway. Yeah, see, I didn't want to talk about this because it's like, it's almost like a whole different, separate thing. But having my heart opened and processing that trauma, and then the next day it was the music, the next day it was watching videos. So that next couple days it was getting myself up to date on the current situation. It really has not improved. And just feeling so helpless that I can't do shit. Nobody in the world, like no other like world powers, are doing anything to stop it. Because the United States and Israel are probably two of the strongest militaries on planet Earth. And so it's like, if you try to stop either one of them, that's a big conflict. So maybe that's why. But it's not stopping. And it's looking less and less like a war and more like an extermination every time I look at it. But no, we don't want to think about that. We don't want to look at that. It hurts too much. This is why I mentioned in that post that I feel so fucking pathetic and weak, because even that's me. I'll watch some of this stuff for a few days, and it affects me so deeply, the stuff that I'm seeing, and how, especially after not looking at it and coming back and realizing, yeah, nothing has changed. It's gotten worse. The death toll is rising. So many women and children just slaughtered. And the infrastructure is just shot now. Like there's nothing left. Hardly anything left. And I'm such a little pussy. I'm so weak myself that I can't even bear to watch the videos for a few days, because it's affecting my life and it's affecting my mental health. I can't look at this. I need to turn it off. And so I turn it off. And it's still happening. which is, I guess, why I made the playlist and why I shared the playlist and why I probably every so often will do the same thing, because like that's the only thing I can do, I guess, is just show people who maybe don't know what's happening. I don't know if that's productive either. Because yes, I can say that, like, doesn't matter what's going on in the world. If I pick some horrific thing that's happening and I watch it every day, yeah, that's not good for me. It's like I said before about revisiting the trauma constantly. But at the same time, on the flip side, to completely ignore it and say, "Oh, I don't want to look at that. That affects me too much. I don't want to think about that." It's like, well, it's still there. It's still happening. Nothing about it is changing. It's growing. It's festering. So neither one of the extremes is good. So I guess right now all I can do is mention it and share a playlist. But it's so fucking sick. But anyway, in that week of occupying these very heavy emotional spaces, I did a lot of, I experienced a lot of emotional release, which is good for me because it lets off pressure that may have been building that I was unaware of, but also it recenters me in my heart. Because if I don't have emotional release, I don't ever get pulled back into my heart. The heart is here with that pain. I'm like, keep your ass over there. I don't want to feel that. I'm going to do this shit. I'm trying to make progress on this or doing whatever. And it's just there, like I said, festering. So when I allow it, or when it opens, sometimes I don't feel like I'm allowing anything. It just happens. But when it opens and I feel it and I start to have this emotional release, I'm getting, in the act of crying, there's a connection being made to like what I really feel. It's a physical expression of what I really feel, right? And it realigns me back with everything, my physical self, my mental self, realigned with my emotional self. But yeah, it's a fucking sick world that we live in. Nobody said that this was all going to be, sunshine, butterflies, and rainbows. Though I did grow up believing that when I was a little kid. And I realized that sometimes, that as blessed as my perfect little childhood was, and it wasn't perfect, but as blessed as my childhood was, the drawback was that I really did grow up super naive and innocent minded to like the pains and the stresses and the traumas of what the real world is and what it brings and what life is. That being said, I maintain, like I said, I still practice gratitude. I focus on what I'm grateful for. But the key to everything, it always comes back to balance, and that's what it is for me. I'm trying to navigate this balance, this equilibrium of not being overly emotional and being, like I said, so affected by all of this stuff, whether it's personal or in the media or whatever. Not being so affected that it fucks up my mental health, but also not completely and absolutely ignoring it. Because, yeah, extremes are not good. Extremes are not good. But it's also not very simple. Or maybe it is simple, but it's not easy to navigate the extremes and maintain a balanced life and going to the middle. But it should be our goal. It is my goal to continue working through past traumas, current traumas, continuing to learn healthier coping mechanisms instead of just my way of being that has been my way of being for my whole life. Just because it's the way I am doesn't mean that it's healthy. Just because it works for me doesn't mean it's a good idea, So hopefully you guys got something out of this video. Felt good to talk about it. Though, like I said, I kind of already have in the past week and a half or so. I have processed all of this stuff and let out the emotions. So I guess I just wanted to explain where I've been at for this past little while here. Oh, and all of this coincided as well with my phone. My battery inflated and I turned it off because I didn't want it to blow up. I mean, I didn't see it inflate, but I was having some issues one day, some grave issues with my phone, and like, what the hell is going on? And then I took the case off, my protective case, and I saw that the back panel was lifted up slightly from an inflated battery, so that's when I shut it off. But about a week exactly with no phone coincided perfectly with all of this stuff, so it allowed me to not distract myself with like whatever I would do on my phone. And I did some reading and feeling and exploring, journaling, and all of this stuff that I said. Like, it was perfectly timed, as if it were planned, for my phone to be out of commission for a week and allowing me to process that stuff that kind of bubbled up. So I'm grateful for that. Because even in general, outside of the context of this video and occupying heavy emotional spaces and working through traumas and all this type of stuff, outside of that context, and I've made a couple videos mentioning this, I'm addicted to my phone. So that was good just to get a clean break from it. Because I did have the opportunity to get it fixed sooner, but I just kept putting it off. Like, I could definitely survive a week. There are some things I needed it for, but in the end, everything worked out fine. And I'm trying to not get sucked right back into that, because what I realized, and it's not even a realization, but what I noticed, what I was reminded of was, and this is part of the phone addiction, is like, I have YouTube on my phone, for example, and I had gotten into the habit for years now of sitting down and looking at a YouTube video on my phone, or even like laying on my back and looking at a YouTube video on my phone. But I have a laptop, I have a TV, I have internet. When it comes to videos, if I'm gonna be doing that anyway, I should just sit down and watch the video, or do it on my computer. It's better anyway, it's a bigger screen. Like, I started doing all of this computer shit on my phone, and yes, it is a little computer, but it's like, that doesn't need to happen. I really should only be using my phone for phone stuff, and in situations where it just makes sense because it's so convenient. But that's not a matter of convenience, where I'm watching videos on YouTube on my phone, because it's just as convenient, if not even more, to put it up on a big screen. But it's just one of those things, bad habit. So I completely broke that cycle, which was cool, and a couple of other things. So yeah, that was good timing with all of it. But again, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this served you in some way, and I hope all is well. Very strange times right now, but I almost feel like I for my entire life, I feel like I could have said that. Maybe not in the beginning, in like the 90s, but for a long time now, if I were to say very strange times indeed in which we are living, that would have been true, and it is true. Shit is kind of weird right now, but I'm grateful that I'm in a good space. I hope you guys are in a good space, or that you're working toward stability. I appreciate you guys. Take care. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.